Hi guys, so today I wanted to just film a sort of get ready with me video. I've got a couple other videos I want to film today as well, but I thought it might be fun to play around with some new makeup. I've got some things in my collection that I've had in my little trial makeup drawers. I have two acrylic drawers that sit off to the side on my beauty vanity, and that's where I put new products that I'm currently trying. But because of the Ulta 21 Days of Beauty sale and some other things that have just piqued my interest, I actually have close to a full face of makeup that I want to play with today, and I thought it would be fun to do it on camera with you guys. My intention is to do a check-in at the end of the day so we can see how all of these things wore, and then I will kind of update you guys in a future video how I feel about these products long term. I don't plan on making just first impressions videos a one and done kind of video on my channel. I definitely want to be able to come back at some point in the future and let you know what's worked and what hasn't worked and why. But I will also say I do have some details to share with you guys today as I go through these, because some of these products are true first impressions and others are products that I have tried 2 or 3 times at this point and are starting to form some pretty solid opinions about what I think about them. So if that interests you, here is what the full look turns out like today, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, get the hair out of the face here. Can we just comment on how happy I am to be wearing a flannel plaid shirt right now? Like, I feel like I'm going to wear a plaid shirt every day this week because the temperatures have gotten a little cooler. Just recently been the first day of fall and I'm all in. So, to start out with, I'm going to use a primer that I know because I'm testing a new foundation today that I have not put on my face once yet, and I want to use a primer that I know and that I've been using a lot the last few weeks, so I feel like I know how it works. It's one that's in my Shop My Stash. It's the MAC Prep and Prime Natural Radiance Base. This is not as glowy as the strobe cream from MAC. It's definitely more of almost like a gel moisturizer that has a little bit of luminosity to it, very, very subtle, but I would say most of the radiance it's claiming is actually coming from the moisturizing factor versus the glowy factor. So I can definitely see myself using this in the wintertime when my skin is a little drier and I just want some natural sort of glow coming from my skin versus sort of a pearlized sheen. So you can see just a little bit of sort of dewiness to the skin, I guess is what I would say. So the foundation I want to try today is from Laura Geller. This is her Filter First Luminous foundation. I picked this up in the Ulta 21 Days of Beauty sale. One day all of the Laura Geller foundations were half off, and I had actually gone into the store and put a little bit of this on the back of my hand and thought, oh wow, this actually feels really nice and looked really pretty, at least on the back of my hand. So when I saw this was going to be 50% off, it was definitely up there on my list of items to purchase during that sale. I will say the cap sucks. It just does not snap into place. That's a little bit annoying, but I was really interested in this after reading the claims online. So it says it's a medium coverage foundation formulated with Lumismooth technology, a fabric-like technology that enhances and perfects skin without masking your overall complexion. That sounds like all the things that I want in my life. So I do want to try this. I put a little bit on the back of my hand once I got it, but I have not actually put it on my face yet. So let's go ahead and do that. So one thing for me, when I do foundations, I typically only use a sponge. So I could do a half face with a brush and a sponge, but if I'm being totally honest, 99% of the time, I don't like how foundations look on me with a brush. I feel like brushes have a tendency to really pick and pull at any dry patches and or just texture on my skin, and I feel like it almost roughs up my skin versus sort of gently applying the foundation. So personal preference, I keep trying brushes, wanting to fall in love with them, and I never have. So for purposes of today, we are going to use a beauty blender like product. This is the little sponge from Maybelline. The L'Oreal sponge, the pink one, gets all kinds of hype and I think it's beautiful, but I actually really like this Maybelline one. It's kind of an hourglass shape. It's got this really nice curve that fits really, really well into the corner of your eye. I mean, that little point is perfect for getting in for concealer. So I like this brush, or I like this sponge. Nobody really talks about it. So I think what I'm going to do is just pump. Let's start with one pump. It's a little runny. I would say it's kind of an average consistency. It's not too thick. And then I'm just going to pick this up and I'm just going to kind of dot smear around my face. That's kind of how I like to lay down foundation first. And then what I will do is come in with my sponge. And with new foundations, I also like to work in a section before moving on, because I never know how quickly these foundations are going to set. Okay, so that is about half of a pump just on this cheek section here. I feel like it is giving me really nice medium coverage. It's not 100% covering up my sunspot here, but it's definitely dealing with any sort of discoloration. So I would agree with its medium coverage claim. I also think this does look very skin-like. It is not the dewiest foundation I've ever seen in my life. Like, I feel like it's almost more of a natural sort of skin finish versus like super glowy and dewy. But I do think it looks really nice as far as coverage levels go. Now, I always like to blend a little bit down my neck. I don't usually do as much as I do on my face, but I do pull a little bit down my neck just because I never feel like foundations ever match me like 100%. Like even my closest shade matches, I just don't want to avoid a line here. So what I tend to do is pick up a tiny little bit on a sponge and then just blend it down my neck a little bit. I actually do think this is a pretty good shade match for me though. It's not super, super pink, but it's definitely maybe more neutrally pink, which is kind of one of my favorite styles. At this point, I have done my cheek, down my neck, and my chin, and I still have a little bit of foundation left here. So I'm gonna use this to do my nose. And then we'll probably end up doing one more pump for the other side of the face. And I sometimes like to take foundation on my finger and really press it around my nose. I have allergies, so I feel like my nose is almost always red from just blowing it, sneezing, etc. So I feel like this area at the bottom of my nose tends to be a little drier on me, and then also just a little redder. So sometimes rather than using a sponge, I will just take my finger and kind of just tap it in here. I'm going to try and zoom you guys in so you can see what I am looking at before we move on to the other side of my face. So I do notice that it is settling here around my nose just a smidge. I may have to come in here with a sponge and deal with that area. But like I said, I tend to get a lot of dryness here, so that is just a common problem with me, not for every single foundation I tried, but there is what it looks like. And here is what my skin looks like without. So I don't feel like this is looking like heavy or makeup-y. It's looking very natural and skin-like. It's got a slight glow to it, but nothing too crazy. Like, I don't feel like this is the glowiest / most hydrating primer of life. I do notice it clinging a little bit to some dry patches that are up here. This is almost more due to just cell turnover. I probably need to exfoliate my skin, so I don't know as if this is a fault of the foundation per se, but I did want to show you guys. Let me turn down the light. If you can see that there on my forehead, it's definitely clinging a little bit here. So it's definitely maybe not the smoothest I've ever seen in this area, but I am probably due to some sort of like exfoliation treatment tonight anyway. And this can happen even with the best of foundations here. But it's not the worst I've seen either. It's just doing a little bit of clinging, and I wanted you guys to be able to see what I am seeing here. So I would probably need to set this with a light powder just to get rid of some of that tackiness before going on with my face. But I will say, one of the things I like to do is kind of let my skin and my foundation sort of set before moving on to the rest of my face. So I typically at this point will move on to eyes and work on those, and then come back and do my concealer, etc. later on, after this has kind of had a chance to set down on its own. If I were to go in with powder right now, because I've got a very sort of tacky wet product, the powder is really going to stick to it, and I find that that's when my makeup can look a little bit more cakey. If I can let this set on its own and lose some of that tackiness, when I go in with a little bit of light powder, I feel like it just looks a little more natural and a little bit more and just a little less powdery. So for me, I kind of do things a little out of order from how I see a lot of people do it on YouTube, but I find that it works well for my skin and my skin type. I will say it didn't cover up this lovely hormonal acne spot I have on my chin, so I did want to call that out. This is definitely not going to be one that will 100% cover acne marks. I will probably come back in with some concealer here in a minute, but let's go ahead and move on to eyes. All right, so I want to use a new single shadow. I picked up NARS recently launched a whole bunch of new, reformulated rather, a whole bunch of their single and duo eyeshadows, and I have to be honest, this shadow completely wowed me. This is the NARS Hardwired shadow. This is in the shade Earthshine. I am going to zoom you guys in here so you can see this shade up close. It has got this like crazy sort of gold duochrome shift to it that I can't quite even, I don't know, it's like pink, green, gold, silver. I mean, it is an absolutely stunning color. I did want to kind of come up with a pairing palette for it, and I wanted it to be a little bit more cool tone. So I'm actually going to use, this is not new, but I'm going to use my Studiomakeup On The Go. This is their Cooldown palette. This is in my everyday makeup drawer right now, and it has a nice mix of sort of taupes and sort of a berry and a dark sort of charcoal-y color down here. So I kind of felt like this taupe shade here in the middle would be the perfect transition shade for something like this. I have primed my eyes with my Urban Decay Primer Potion in Eden to kind of cancel out any sort of redness or veining. And then I've done one step on my eyebrows. I've been experimenting with a new brow technique where I've actually been using my Make Me Brow first and kind of running that through my brows to thicken them up and kind of get them in place. And then it does add a little bit of color and definition. And then I've been going in with my Cosmetics Brow Power Universal Brow Pencil and just filling in some sparse places after this has set. So I would say this is still in the process of setting down right now. So I will probably come in at the end of my eye look and finish up my brows. But let's go ahead and do crease shade. I am not going to set my eyeshadow first at all. I'm going to just go in and use that tackiness to really adhere, or rather cause my eyeshadows to adhere, because I also feel like that slightly tacky base that I have now from the Urban Decay product is going to do well with this shadow to help it kind of adhere. I sometimes will set my eyeshadow if I feel like I've got colors that are super pigmented and really need a powdery base underneath to help them blend more smoothly. But for day-to-day use, I prefer not to set it if I can avoid it, because I do feel like that slightly tacky base is what grips my eyeshadow and helps it to stay on. I just watched Emily Noel do a video where she talked about this and kind of her approach to eyeshadow primers, and I'm in total agreement. I had never even thought to set my eyeshadow base, and to be honest, I feel like the colors are a little less vivid when I do that. Works in my advantage sometimes with highly pigmented shadows that can be difficult to blend. But in general, it's not my preferred technique. So I'm just going to use a Wayne Goss number 16 brush. Actually, let me zoom you in here. And I'm going to use this middle shade here to kind of build up my crease color. And I've talked about this before. I've got a lot of space between my crease and my brow that I'm always looking to sort of blend out and diffuse color through, because when I look at you guys normally, you can see my eyes are fairly hooded, so I'm really not seeing a ton of my lid space except for when I'm blinking or if I'm raising my eyebrows, which I often do for photos because it shows more of my lid. But in general, if my face is just relaxed, I'm not really paying attention to how I'm holding my eyes or my eyebrows, you don't see a ton of my lid space. What you're actually seeing is this transition color. So for me, it's just very important that I fill in that space up above. And then I also like to kind of blend this out into my outer corner and start to form sort of a lifted shape. So I kind of position my brush like this to try and lift my shape up a little bit like this, but I like very diffused eye looks. I'm not a huge fan of that really crisp line. Every once in a while I'll do it, but on a daily basis, that is not my kind of preferred eye method. I like things that are very diffused and blown out. So this brush is good for sort of laying down that first layer, and like I said, I like to lay it down in the outer corners and through my crease. What I often do is take a more detailed brush. So this is a similar shape. This is a Wayne Goss number 17 brush. It is a little bit smaller. It picks up a little bit more product. So this one is going to go more concentrated in my outer corner. So I'm just using the same shade again, but because the brush is a little smaller, a little more dense, a little less fluffy, it is actually picking up and laying down color a little bit more deeply. So I find I can often use the same color, just different brushes in my outer corner, and versus sort of that transition shade, I can often use the same color. Then I am going to run a little bit more of this through my actual crease, just to deepen that up too. And then I'm going to take that same brush and I'm going to go into this burgundy shade here in the corner, and I'm going to pick it up on this brush so I've got an even amount on there. And then because I don't want it to be super intense, I'm actually going to tap this brush once onto a tissue, and that's going to get off a little bit of product. I prefer to build things slowly so that I feel like I'm in more control of how deep or bold eye looks get versus applying a big bold amount of color and then trying to figure out how to diffuse it. I just personally would rather build it up slowly. All right, so now on to the star of the show, this NARS Hardwired in Earthshine. I'm gonna try this with a, let's see, what do I want to try this with? I think I'm gonna try this with a little Sonia Kashuk brush. This is the small eyeshadow brush. It is not a flat shader brush. It has a little bit of a dome to it. It's a little fluffier. I often find that that little bit of fluff helps to pick up eyeshadow well. It will be interesting to see if this one causes a absolute ton of fallout. So what I'm doing is just kind of jiggling it in here a little bit, and then I'm going to tap this off onto the Kleenex in front of me, because that is typically where I get the most fallout. So let's see how this goes. I don't know if this is a shade that's going to work better with my finger or wet, but let's try. Actually, I think that's going pretty well on with just the brush. I'm just kind of patting this on because it has that micro shimmer in it. I don't want to do big swiping motions because that tends to be when micro shimmer can go everywhere, and I want to control where this ends up. All right, that is gorgeous. I love that. Yeah, I personally don't feel like I need this to be any more intense. Like, I feel like that's pretty intense on its own. I don't feel like I need a finger or a wet brush or anything like that. Like, this little dry shader brush and the product on its own just seem to work pretty well. So I'm going to finish the eyes here in just a second, but let's go ahead and move back into my face and do some concealer and all that jazz first. So I really, really loved the Stellar foundation. It was one I tried towards the end of last year, I think maybe in December, and I've used it on and off throughout this year. It's very smoothing, it's nicely hydrating. It's just one of those ones that just looks phenomenal on my skin. So I've had my eye on this Stellar under eye concealer for a while. I did pick up the shade L01. It is the lightest shade. It's really nice and neutral though. I don't feel like it's super pink or super yellow. I have to be honest, guys, I am really enjoying this concealer. Do one eye here. I've been doing like a little sort of smoosh here in the corner where I have the most darkness, and then I've just been doing about 3 dots out like that. I am not a huge fan of the triangle underneath the eye. It's just not a technique I use, but I do really like this sort of blended out with a sponge. And I would say this gives nice sort of medium coverage. You can see it's definitely brightened up my under eyes, but it's definitely not 100% dealt with the darkness. So what I typically do, because I would rather build up slowly, is put a teeny tiny bit more here. And then with my ring finger, I will just blend this out. I prefer to go in with a tiny bit of concealer first, and then really just hit that area in the corner where I've got a little bit more darkness if I need to. I find that this one is not creasing on me. It's just been really smoothing underneath my eyes. My under eyes this morning are they're pretty dry for me right now. I feel like I just didn't drink enough water yesterday and my skin is feeling that. So this is about as crepey as my under eyes typically look, even with moisturizer galore on them. and I still feel like this concealer is handling it really well. I am going to set this with my Cover FX Perfect Setting Powder. I do really like this one for underneath my eyes. I'm just using that Real Techniques setting brush with a tiny bit of powder on it. Once again, my goal is to use as little amount of powder as need be to set my makeup and then make sure that it lasts. I have, for those of you who haven't heard me talk about it, I would say I have normal skin. I'm not dry and I'm not oily either. But I definitely feel like I can lean too oily with some dewy stuff sometimes. And I feel like on the flip side, I can push it too far with powders and then I do look dry. I still am not loving how this foundation is looking on my forehead. It's looking very sort of creepy. Definitely not loving how this is looking here on my forehead. But let's go ahead and set with some powder that I've really been enjoying that may come in and save the day. We shall see. It might not. But the foundation itself feels like it's mostly set. Like, I don't know. I still want to put a little bit of this powder on because I want to show you guys how much I've been enjoying it. But to be honest, I probably could get away with not setting this one, which is nice. I'm going to do a little bit of concealer on the friend that has come out to play this month. My favorite concealer for spot concealing like this is actually from Revlon. It is their Photo Ready Concealer. I am in the shade Light, and it is a stick concealer, but it's nicely creamy without being too creamy. It blends really well, gives good coverage, sets into place. I really enjoy it. I am looking for this. So this is a little baby hourglass powder sample. So this is their Veil Translucent Setting Powder. This is a talc-free powder. It has a slight luminosity to it. I feel like this is a powder that you could use for either setting your makeup or to maybe buff out at the very end. I've really been enjoying it to set my makeup though. So I'm just going to use a Wayne Gross 00 powder brush. I've got a little bit here in the cap. This little travel sample size that I got for free is definitely not the easiest to use because it is so small and I'm struggling to get powder on my brush evenly on this little tiny container. And I'm tapping a little bit more onto the brush and then just kind of using this container. So I have been just lightly sort of buffing this all over my face. This powder brush is definitely a little bit looser, a little fluffier, but it's got a pointed tip to it, so it's very easy to kind of target it into spots. And I just feel like it does such a nice job of smoothing my skin. I hope that you can see this on camera. It's just one of those powders, so this side is set and sort of smooth looking now, and this side doesn't have that smoothness. That there's still a little bit more, I don't know, texture, not texture, but just, I don't know, this is a veil, right? So aptly named, it's a veil. I'm going to try and apply this while I am zoomed in close here, so maybe you guys can see what I am seeing here. I don't know, I hope you guys see that. It just doesn't look cakey in the least. And it's so smoothing and just, I don't know. So I'm also curious to see how this handles this area on my forehead, and if it makes it worse or the smoothing nature of this powder actually potentially makes it better. I don't know, we'll see. And I actually feel like that powder helped. I still see a little bit of that crepiness here. Let me turn the lights down so you can really see. I still see a little bit of that crepiness there on my forehead and that texture that I was seeing earlier, but it's definitely much improved. So yeah, I didn't want to like this powder because it's expensive, but I kind of feel like I'm going to use up this little sample size here, and then probably at the Sephora fall sale or going into holiday sale that they do every single year, where we get, I think it's usually 20% off, 15 or 20, I will probably pick up a full container of that because I have not been so gaga for a powder in a while, and I love that it's talc free. So okay, face, yeah, I did it. So I have never bought one of these Hourglass giant face palettes that come out at holiday, but this one really kind of called to me. These are new formulas. So these two are, what do they call these? These two are finishing powders. So this is Soft Light and Filtered Light. These are incredibly soft and creamy. There is absolutely no there's absolutely no glitter in these at all. It's just a very soft, diffused color. You've got a really nice shimmery bronzer. They call this one their bronzer in Golden Light. And then you've got two blushes down here, one that does have some micro shimmer and one that is just more of a pearlescent shade. So this is Nude Glow and Mood Flush. And then down at the end, they have one of their new strobing powders. These, we have seen this formula before in a set of 3 highlighters. I had not picked that up because I didn't feel like 2 of them would work well for my skin tone, but the formula on those I much prefer to their other highlighting powders that have a lot more glitter particles in them. These were just a more metallic pearl pigment. So this one is maybe a little smidge gold on me, but I feel like it's got some peachiness to it that I can wear it. So I do want to use this to kind of do the rest of my face today. All right, so I'm going to go into the bronzer first. I'm just using a Wayne Goss number 11 brush, and I'm just going to pick up some of this bronzer. I do think this is a bronzer that is going to work well for fair to light. I have seen some people with medium skin use this, and it's very, very subtle on them. So I do feel like it is one that is going to work probably best for fair to light skin tones. Not sure it's going to be able to be built up enough to really work for deeper, unfortunately. I would love to see Hourglass, when they do these palettes, come out with like 2 versions, because I do think that they would sell. I think these usually sell pretty well for them, and I think they would hit a whole new demographic who is passing them by sometimes because it just doesn't work for them. I have used this palette, I think, twice now, so this is my 3rd time using it, and I've been so impressed with how things just diffuse. This bronzer just, I don't know, it just blends into the skin so well. It's giving me a soft sort of glow, but it's nothing too shiny. It's almost more of a satin. But like I said, it just blends into the skin like so smoothly. For blush, I think I'm going to use the shade here, which is Mood Flush. This one doesn't have any glitter in it, and I feel like with my more cool toned look here today that shade is going to work the best. And it just is such a pretty plummy rose color. Like, so pretty. I just don't want to stop putting it on. That's the problem. Okay, halting. For highlighter, obviously we're going to use the one in here today. And then this is a Wayne Goss 02 brush. And if you use a more dense highlighting brush, this one is pretty floppy. You will really pick up a ton of product, and it will be very intense right out of the gate. This one I feel like takes metallic highlighters and diffuses them a little bit, which is one of the reasons I love this brush. It's absolutely beautiful. For as much as it has a little bit of a gold shift to it, I find that it works beautifully on my skin, and I am somebody who constantly is griping to you guys about gold highlights looking brassy on me. So I am really pleasantly surprised and happy with all of the shades in here, and it's part of the reason I got this palette versus ones in the past. I felt like I was going to be able to really use all the shades in here. So I'm just going to take a Wayne Goss number 13 brush. It's a little smaller of a buffing brush, and I'm going to pick up this middle shade here, and I'm going to use this as my buffing shade over the top of areas where I have bronzer. It's a little bit of a deeper tone for powder for me, but if I use it over the top of bronzer to kind of be that diffused look finishing powder, I really like it. And then I'm just going to wipe that brush off, and I'm going to use the same brush for buffing out the other areas of my face. And this is not a necessary step, but it is one that I like when I want my skin to look super diffused and super just flawless. I have a feeling, I have not tried yet, I probably should try at some point, that these would actually work really well as setting powders as well, not just finishing powders. I feel like this light shade would actually be a really nice setting powder for me. So that is skin done. I just feel like it's so soft and fresh and pretty. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up my brows off camera, and then we will come back in and finish up the eyes. Okay, so to finish up my eyes, I'm just going to take a little Wayne Goss pencil brush, and I'm going to use this middle taupe shade in this palette again and just run this underneath my eyes. And then I'm going to use that same brush and I'm going to pick up this burgundy shade here in the corner, and I'm just going to do this right in the outer corner to make sure it is connecting to the darker color out here. And then I've been using a lot of sort of eyeshadow as liner lately, so I think I'm going to just use this dark slate gray color here, and I'm going to use a little Wayne Goss 08 brush. It is a flat, tiny little liner brush, and I love it for applying eyeshadow. So I'm just going to start this sort of in the middle and wing it out, and then see how I feel about it being more towards the center of my eyes once I have it on. And I feel like that makes such a big difference with just lightly defining my eyes without looking like I've put eyeliner on. And my eyes turn down, so they're not perfectly, like, I'm slightly hooded and they have slightly downturned eyes. So one of the things I like to do is follow the natural, so the peak of my eye, I like to follow it kind of straight out and then connect it down a little bit, because if I run this shadow right along my lash line, I'm gonna sort of maintain that sort of downward slope on my eye. So what I prefer to do, like I said, is run it kind of straight out from sort of the peak of my lid and then connect it down. And I find what that does is to help lift my eyes a little bit. And then I do want to add just a little bit of deepness to my lower lash line, but I don't want to go black, so I think I'm going to use this. This is Julep. This is When Pencil Met Gel Long Lasting Eyeliner. This is in the shade Clay, so it's a really nice sort of soft gray taupey shade. I'm just going to put that in my lower lash line. And that's just adding a little bit more smokiness that I wanted. So at this point my makeup is mostly done. I need to curl my lashes, but I'm actually going to set my makeup first. One trick that I think helps me a little bit because my lashes stick out perfectly straight is to actually use my setting spray, the one that is actually going to lock in my makeup. So my Skindinavia makeup setting spray. I like to actually spray my face with this first, let it dry, and then curl my lashes, because I feel like there's almost slight hairspray-like qualities to this. It's one of the reasons it really does last and extend my makeup. I also feel like it helps me to hold the curl on my lashes a smidge. I don't think it's entirely in my head, but just set everything into place. I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to then go curl and put on mascara. I don't have new mascaras to try, so I'm just going to be using my Tarteist mascara. It's one that's in my everyday makeup drawer. It's not my favorite mascara, but I'm definitely enjoying it as it's drying out a little bit more. And then on my lower lash line, my waterproof Clump Crusher from CoverGirl. It's kind of my always everyday bottom lash mascara. So I'm going to go off camera, do these, and I'll be right back. So that is mascara on. I really love how that Hardwired eyeshadow is looking. I mean, I love that it's kind of shifting teal to pink to silver on my lids. I hope the camera is picking up how cool this is in real life. Such a fun color. For lips today, I have two new L'Oreal products. So you're like, those aren't new. Yet they are. So they have Color Shine nude lipstick range that they have just launched for fall. I don't feel like anybody's talked about this. I stumbled on this on the Ulta website the other day when I kind of went into L'Oreal and sorted from newest, or sorted them to new products to be at the top. And what I realized, they actually have two new ranges in this Color Shine line. So they've released a whole new section of either 6 or 8 nude colors. I picked up the shade Topless because it looked like a really pretty cool toned pinky gloss, and I didn't have a lot of nudes from this line that I 100% loved. I felt like some of the nudes they launched initially were very, very pale and milky looking. I am pleased to report this is not one of these milky colors. I have worn this once before. And then they also released 3 sort of holographic lip colors. So these reminded me a lot of the ones that Dior has launched, especially this shade. So this is this shade Bay, and it is clear, but what you can't quite see is how intense the holographic sort of pinky shifts actually are in here through a very fine micro shimmer. So there is a Dior lipstick that has a similar sort of holographic shifty pigment in it, and I have stared at it so many times in the stores. It's part of their sort of lip balm series. I think that the undertone is so cool, and I don't know, I just had really been attracted to it, but I couldn't bring myself to spend the, I don't know, it was like $34 or some obnoxious price like that. So I picked this up, and I have really been enjoying the micro shimmer effect of this sort of holographic one, the clear one that I have. So let's wipe off any foundation that's on my lips first. And then let's go in with the shade Topless. I'm not even kidding you. This might be my new favorite go-to everyday nude lip color. I mean, it's freaking perfect. Like, I love everything about the undertone, the shine, everything. This formula has been one of my favorites this year, but this color is so perfect. It makes me want to go pick up more of these in this new nude range. I will leave that link down below to those shades in particular so you can see what are the new shades that have come out for fall. But I'm in the process of starting to pick up new drugstore makeup that's been releasing for fall and putting them to the test, and I am so freaking thrilled with this. But I do want to show you what this does. So I'm going to put a little bit of this in the center of my lip. And the micro shimmer is a little pinkish in this one, but I really love the effect of that little bit of, almost acts like a gloss topper, to be honest. But I have really thoroughly been enjoying this sort of, what did they call this? The hashtag Bay Color Riche Holographic Shine lipstick. They have two colors that are a little bit deeper, but this clear one I feel like is going to be super versatile. It's just really pretty. Alright guys, so here is the finished look. Products that I know I love and I'm really happy with. This Hourglass palette. If you are light, fair, and maybe a light medium color, this is absolutely stunning. I think you would absolutely get a full use out of every single color in that palette, which is always what I'm looking for when I'm purchasing a face palette. I'm really impressed with this Hardwired NARS shade in Earthshine. I just think it is giving me such a cool multi-dimensional effect to the tops of my lids. I'm also clearly in love with these L'Oreal Shine lipsticks, and I'm thrilled with the new extension with nude shades, and the holographic is a lot of fun. I feel like I'm gonna have to play around with this foundation. I wanna see how it wears throughout the day here. So far, I feel like it's one that I'm gonna have to probably make sure that I've exfoliated my skin the night before, because I did notice it clinging a little bit here and a little here. I'm also getting my usual sort of a little bit of settling, not settling, but a little bit of clinging to the dryness that often is right here in my nose with this one. So I don't think it's necessarily a hydrating foundation, but for the rest of my skin, I just feel like it looks very soft and very natural and very pretty. So I am very much enjoying the look of my skin. I really do feel like that Hourglass Veil powder made a huge difference in even how this looked from a texture perspective in areas where this foundation was struggling. I really hate to say this, but every time I've used this Hourglass powder, it has made my skin, and all of the foundations I've tried with it so far, I think I've tried it with probably, I think this is about the 6th foundation I've tried it with at this point, and oh my gosh, I wish I didn't like it as much as I do, but I do, so there is that. So I am going to do a check-in here at the end of the day so you can see how this wore throughout the day. It is 1:30 now. I've had this on since about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so we're going to call it about a 1 o'clock check-in time as far as when I got done putting on my base makeup. So I'm hoping I can get at least an 8-hour wear test, if not 10, but regardless, I will continue to test this even past the check-in for today with different primers, exfoliating my skin, etc., so I can really put this one to the test, and I'll update you guys in the future. So we will fast forward to the future so you can see how this is looking on my skin 8 to 10 hours later. Hey guys, I just wanted to check in real fast. It is a little after 6 right now, 6:08 to be exact, so this has been on my skin for about 5 hours now. I do think I am looking maybe a smidge shiny, which is out of character for me. I am not somebody who usually has oils peeking throughout the day while I'm wearing foundation, unless it is an extremely glowy foundation to begin with, so I'm a little surprised to see this glow coming through because I would have considered this to be more a natural finish foundation. Now, that being said, I don't feel like this is breaking down on my skin at all. In fact, I'm going to zoom you in here. The areas on my forehead that were giving me concern seem to actually be gone. I'm seeing a tiny bit of settling right here. But that's pretty normal for me because I've got a little bit of fine lines there. My chin is actually not looking too bad. It's maybe worn off a little bit because I was sitting at my desk like this. And I would say my nose is pretty comparable to how it was looking before, with a little bit of settling here around my, you know, right in here. But that is also very common for me. But in general, I think my skin is holding together. The bronzer and blush and everything is definitely still in place. So I will check in with you guys at the end of the night and we'll see how we're looking. Hi guys, just wanted to give you a quick final check-in on kind of how the makeup went for the day. It is now 10:45 at night, so it's been on my face for 9 and like 3/4 hours, so almost 10 hours of wear at this point. I do think I've gotten maybe slightly more shiny, but I'm not noticing that it is breaking down at all anywhere on my face. So my forehead still seems to actually look pretty well, and this space here in the center that I was worried about is definitely not as bad. My eyeshadow has creased a little bit, which is a little bit out of character for me, so I do feel like for this NARS eyeshadow, I might want to try a different base or maybe wet it, or maybe use a glitter glue. It is a thinner eyeshadow, so that might be part of the challenge there, but I don't typically have this kind of creasing with my eyeshadow, so I'm gonna play around with that a bit more and see if I can come up with a technique that makes it last a little bit longer. So right here, it's looking a little dry and crepey feeling, like I just feel like it looks a little cakey and it's clinging to dry patches here on my chin. But my cheeks are actually looking okay. I feel like none of that is breaking down. It hasn't gotten worse around my nose. I'm gonna try blotting and see how that works. Oh yeah, I was definitely pretty oily. But it doesn't look like any of the foundation is coming off on here. It's not lifting up or separating. If that was happening, I would typically see the foundation coming off on these blotting papers as I use them, and I'm just not seeing anything actually on the papers themselves. But it is interesting that this foundation in particular is having this issue because it wasn't quite as glowy as a lot of other foundations are on me. So I'm going to try this a little bit more. Today was not a particular hot or cold day, so really this is one that I feel like might be a lot more oily if I was dealing with heat or humidity, but I'm going to try this a few more times, use a couple of different primers, maybe one that's less glowy than the one I used, and see how it works. But all in all, I wouldn't say this is like my instant new favorite foundation, but it's one that I still want to play with a bit more because I think I might be able to get it to work. So I will give you guys a final verdict on this whole foundation when I do a check-in from the products that we tried today at some point here in the future. But until then, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.